Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Are we live? All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Betsy McCoy. I am the president and founder of Communities Rising, which is a nonprofit organization that works in India, and we do educational programs for children in marginalized communities. And so today we're going to talk about our work and all the issues that we face in working in that type of an environment in India, which is much different from what you would experience here. But I'd like to start the day by with something that we do in all of our classes now. We start with a sharing circle every morning, or whenever we're in their classrooms, and we try to have the students talk about something in their, something that's happened that's important to them, or just we talk about feelings and emotions, things that are going on in their lives. We're not going to talk so much about that. I was going to ask you to say your name, and if you have a question that you would like to know about India, anything. And so we'll start with that. Why don't we start over here?
My name's Lauren. So I guess maybe what are some of the biggest differences between a school in India or the school that you work in and the school that we have here in the United States?
Okay. And a lot of these questions will get answered as we go through the program, so I'm not going to answer them now, but I want to hear what you have questions about.
My name's Molly. Is there a really big difference? Like there's something that's very different in contrast? Like I know kind of what she said, but
Right. Okay. Yeah. We will talk about all that. And how about you go next? I'm just asking everybody to say their name and if they have a question about education in India.
My name's Donna Powell, and I saw the class online and thought I'd come in.
Okay.
Listen in.
Do you have a specific question about India and anything? No?
Curious.
Okay. All right. Great.
Hi, my name is Christy. Is education pretty much the same all throughout India?
Okay. We'll talk about that.
My name's Dick. Can you tell us about how the government interferes with your work?
Okay. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Another thing that we try to do with our kids, and I'm going to talk about why we do these things, but we start off our day with some sort of a meditation or focus activity. And so this is what's called a Tibetan singing bowl. They're from Tibet, and we have smaller ones in most of our classes. And we try to do breathing exercises with the kids to just either at the beginning of the day or the middle of the day to get them calmed down and get them focused for a minute. So we're just going to do this for a minute. And what I'd like you all to do is close your eyes and I'll give you some breathing instructions, and we will just have a breathing exercise to start off our day. And if you just breathe in slowly through your nose and out through your mouth. Through your nose and out through your mouth. And then just have your mind go down through your body, start at your head, and go all the way down and just kind of check in and see how your body's feeling. From your head to your neck, shoulders, chest, waist, down through your legs, all the way down to your toes. And just check in and see how you're feeling. Don't have to try to change anything, just recognize it. And we're just going to take a cleansing breath and let you open your eyes and just softly focus on some object in front of you in the room. Okay. All right. So we usually do that with our children for the whole exercise takes about 5-10 minutes depending on what's going on in the classroom. I'm going to put this down here, and we're going to talk about our program and we'll try to go through this PowerPoint presentation. Probably one of the most common questions I get, everybody asks me, is how did you ever end up in India? It's not that common that people go and have an organization in India. And it's a longer story, but basically I got there because of one of my children who went to India when he was a senior in high school. He went during Christmas break for a couple of weeks to help out a chaplain at Holy Spirit Hospital with a nonprofit that he ran. And so he spent a couple weeks there and was this changed guy when he came back, and changed his major that he was going to have in college, changed where he was applying to college, just sort of said, this is what I want to do. And you can see, he is right there, and these are his students that he taught 1 year after he graduated from college. So I got there because of Matt, and I started working with the organization that he worked with initially, and was on their board and did work in the US for them for a couple of years. And then finally, I went there and never stopped going after that. So when originally I was working with the organization that Matt worked with, but then I changed and started our own organization. I made enough contacts there in India. I wanted to focus on education, and so we started an organization called Communities Rising, and we had one school with 45 students, and our basic plan wasn't very detailed, but it was just to try and help these kids with their studies. They lived in a very poor village, and they were, not doing well academically, and so we were going to try and just boost them along. One of the things that you might know something about, but not too much about, is the caste system in India. We work with untouchable children, which are the Dalits, okay, at the bottom of this system. The caste system is very old. It's over 3,000 years old. It's based on the Hindu faith, but it is practiced by all faiths in India. The caste system has permeated the entire culture. You're born into a caste. You stay in that caste throughout your life. You can never move. The Hindus believe that when you're reincarnated, you can possibly move up if you've led a good life, but you can't move during your life. There is much discrimination based on the caste system, even though in 1955 there was a law that was passed outlawing discrimination based on caste. But there's tremendous discrimination that still exists. It influences everything in your life, from employment to housing, where you live, who you marry particularly. And so it's a tremendous, it's very important. At the top of the pile are the Brahmins. They were originally the academics and the priests in society. Then we have the Kshatriyas, and they were the rulers and the warriors. And then we've got the Vaishyas, who are the tradesmen and the farmers. The Shudras were the manual laborers. And at the very bottom are the Dalits, which are really out of the caste system. You see the block they're separated from these other groups. And they're really not in the caste system at all. And they are considered broken people. They were created to do the manual labor and the jobs that nobody else wanted to do, picking up dead animals off the street, doing things like laundry, things that nobody wanted to do. That was why that caste was created. So we deal with, most of our kids are Dalits. There are a variety of religions. The majority of children that we teach are Hindus, some Muslims and some Christians, but mostly they're Hindus. But they're almost all Dalits. And the majority of Dalits live in 4 states in India, 3 states in the very north of the country, and 1 state in the south, which is Tamil Nadu, which is where we work. There's tremendous poverty in our district, and the state of Tamil Nadu is doing pretty well economically, but the district, which is like a county compared to here, the Villapur district, is the poorest district in the state. So we have the lowest GDP. Our people make about $102 a year, okay? Literacy rate is only 64%, and it is definitely lower for women. And we have the lowest life expectancy in the state, which is 65 years. And so this is one of our after-school programs. So you can see the kids are outside because we don't have a place that's big enough to put all these kids. So we teach outside on the street, and you know, when we're teaching, there's cows walking through the classes, people come and watch, chickens come through. I mean, it's just, you're outside in a village, and you can see there's a hut behind you. We work in that little stone building over there, but it's, there's another stone, couple more that they let us come in, but it's pretty remote.
Question.
Yes,
I hate to throw you off, but go back to that previous slide.
this one?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That life expectancy is 65 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty phenomenal. If they are living that poor and have that little, that's not more than 10 years younger than in this country.
Yeah, I'm
Their
not
life
sure what I think
expectancy.
our life expectancy now is maybe in the 80s, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
it's revised down
But,
since, a
yeah.
little bit since the COVID, but okay, even 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty phenomenal.
It's
Yeah.
also split between male and female in the United States. Males are like 78 and the females like 82.
Yes, and I think it's the same in India. I think the women was longer. Yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get.
No problem. So if you remember, we started with one after-school program and 45 kids. That was in 2009. By 2014, we had 9 schools, 1,600 students, 22 staff, most of whom were part-time staff. And our curriculum was Tamil, which is the language that's spoken in our state. There's over 200 languages that are spoken in India, and each state has their own language. And so Tamil, we taught English. English is a required language in our schools. So we were teaching that. Math, computer education, we actually brought computers in, and art and music. So if you can see, this is a typical classroom, Molly, when you were asking about how it's different, okay? If you look in that classroom, you'll see one, everybody sits on the floor. There's no desks. There's nothing in the classroom except chalkboards. There's no supplies, there's no books, there's nothing except for some chalkboards on the walls, and that's all. This is one of our after-school teachers. She was teaching outside on the grass because we often teach outside in our after-school programs. And this is one of our classrooms. Electricity is really variable in our area. It goes out a lot. A lot of schools don't have much. And so we were teaching our after-school class in the evening, and it was dark, so we were teaching by flashlight. So we do whatever we need to do, whether we need to teach outside or use a flashlight, that's what we do. By this time, all right, we decided that after 5 years, it was time to assess what was going on in our program. We had been working with a PhD candidate from the University of Delaware, Noelle Shadwin, who had been an intern with our program a couple years ago and who had gone to high school with my kids. She came to India as an intern, worked in our after-school programs, and then as she was at Delaware and getting her PhD in psychology, she talked to me about helping out with assessing the kids. So we did an assessment in 2013. We were asking academic questions, psychological questions, and demographic questions, just to try to get a feel for where we were. We used our kids in our schools, and then we also had control schools, other schools where they did not have our program. So we were trying to compare our kids to those kids. And our academic questions that we used were developed by Pratham Education, which is a large educational NGO in India, and they test kids throughout rural India every year. So we used their test so that we had something to compare our kids to nationally also. And so what we found was that our students were doing better than students who didn't have our program, but they were still about 3 years behind grade level. So that meant if they were in 4th grade, they were on the 1st grade level. And we were really discouraged with that. And then we also found that 68% had PTSD symptoms, which was primarily coming from violence in their homes, and also a tremendous number of accidents that they witnessed, car accidents in their areas, and also a lot of exposure to suicide. Suicide is a huge problem, and they see a lot of it in their villages. And so we found these symptoms, and we also had 10% of our kids who were no older than 10 who were considering suicide. So when we got all these results, we were kind of shaken. We decided that we had to do something about everything.
Did you assess?
Up to 10. We were only teaching 4th and 5th graders here at this point in time. So what we did was we totally revamped our academic program. There were no psychologists who were available to help with our kids. So what we did was we borrowed from a number of programs in this country to incorporate SEL into social and emotional learning program into our classrooms there. You hear a lot about it now and a lot of controversy about it, but it was extremely helpful. We went to Penn State, who had developed a tremendous program that's used in the Head Start program throughout Pennsylvania for sure, and throughout the country. And we got, assistance from them in developing a program. And then the only person we could find who would help our kids, our 10% of kids who were considering suicide, was a nun who had 6 months training in counseling and who worked with, kids who had problems. And so she agreed to come to our program, and what we did was we would bring this group of children in on Saturday, and they would come to our offices, and we worked with those kids, and she would talk to them individually, and we just would work with those kids every Saturday for the next year.
Betsy,
Yeah.
you said you're community rising students, so how did you get those kids to be in your community rising schools versus your non-community rising? Like, was it just in the one village?
No, we were in, I think, what did I say, we had, at this point, we had 11 schools, I think.
Okay.
So we were in 11 different villages.
Okay.
And they had heard about the program in the one village, so then other villages started asking to be in it.
Okay.
And so we just added them on.
Okay.
But at this point, we were really only trying to work with 4th and 5th graders. Primarily because in India, primary school stops at 5th, and then in 6th grade, you often move to a middle school, and you go to another physical place. So we were trying to catch the kids before they moved on. So what we developed was what we called our on-target program. And our goal was to just get kids working at grade level. We were teaching what happened before was we were trying to supplement what was in their textbooks, but we found that the textbooks were simply too hard and didn't correlate to what they actually could do or what they knew. So we kind of threw textbooks out, we didn't use them at all. And we went back to the beginning, really back to basics, teaching numbers, teaching letters, starting from the very beginning. So we taught to their levels. We spent a lot of time training teachers. At this point, our staff was part-time. They were all teachers who lived in these various villages, often worked in other schools in the day, and then we had them come and teach for us 2 hours in the afternoon. They teach from 4 to 6. And so we were working with training them and teaching them how to teach. And then we would do regular assessments, and that's not like we were testing them all the time. We would do an assessment at the beginning of the year, another one at the end of the year, and then in between it would be informal type assessments, just trying to check and see where they were. India is a very test-oriented society. They test their kids all the time, and everything goes on the test. So we were trying not to be totally test-oriented, because they have more than enough tests. We incorporated the social and emotional learning into the classroom, as I said. We did circle time, we would do the meditation, we would have a student of the day who would get a kerchief to wear, and just do a number of things to try and be with the kids. I mean, we really tried to teach the teachers how important it was to have a good relationship with their students. I never ever walk in an Indian classroom that there isn't a big stick sitting on the desk, never. And they use it to bang on the desk to get attention, but they also use it to bang on the kids. And it is illegal now to hit kids, to use corporal punishment, but it is done all the time. And so we had a strong rule with our teachers. No corporal punishment was allowed. No, no speaking badly to students, like they were supposed to be a positive influence in the kids' lives. This is not typical in Indian classrooms. And when I say Indian classrooms, please remember that I'm talking about the classrooms I teach in the area of the country that we teach in, which is this Villapuram district, which is a very poor area. Yes, there are different schools all over India that do things differently and don't work like we do, but we only can work in our area. And so what we see all the time is a lot of beating and a lot of negative talk to students. I've had kids who've had fingers broken. I've had kids who have, who are referred to as, definitely everybody who has some sort of a learning disability is an MR, okay? They're a mental retard, that's what they call them. And they will, take the kids who are the slower kids, and I've had a kid who had dyslexia, and he was like put in a separate group. They would call, the teachers themselves would call them names and tell the other students, do not hang out with these kids because you will get like them. It is very, very different. There is not that training in educational programs for teachers. And when they go to teacher training school, they don't train them in this kind of stuff. They don't teach them at all. So it's really difficult. And we tried to change that. We had a lot of pushback from our teachers initially, especially about not hitting kids because they felt it was necessary. And how else can you possibly discipline a kid without hitting them? It's done in their homes, it's done in their classrooms. And they pushed back hard. But we, pushed back equally hard, my administrators and myself, about this particular thing. And after time, they came around and they saw that it worked. But it was a struggle for a while. So as you can see now, this chart, all right, this was after a year of our new program. We got our kids doing, if you look at the control, which is I think it's black, but I'm not sure what color that is actually, but it looks like black on the screen. In India, okay, and we're talking about, when you say sixth standard, they call their classes standards, not classes, or not grades. So sixth grade, throughout India, and this was because we were using the problem test, we could get these statistics from them, 32% of sixth graders could do division. All right, that's the standard. Here, the control schools in our area were better. 50% of them could do division. After this year with us, 90% of our kids could do division after a new program. English sentences with meaning, because we were teaching English. In India, 64% of the kids could read an English sentence with meaning, and they were very simple sentences. I believe they were testing, not on a really high level, but that's where they were. Our control schools were lower. They were, whatever, that's probably about 40%, and our kids were at 93.5. And then this is reading in Tamil, okay? You can see 58% could read a story in all of India, a little bit higher than that for the control schools, and our kids were up at 96.8. So we felt like the program was definitely working after we got these tests back. And we were continually working. Noel worked with us for a series of years to help go through and test our kids on all these different factors. what happened was the next year, the word got out, what was happening in our classrooms. And so schools asked us to come in and teach English. They wanted us to teach their teachers how to teach English because they were having a lot of trouble. You know, the teachers are expected to teach English in primary schools, but very few of them really know much English. Like, they're kind of learning English as they teach the kids. You know, when I go in and I talk to them in the schools, and I go to every single one of our schools every year when I'm there, they have a hard time talking to me. Some of them can, but a lot of them know. So they have trouble teaching the kids and they needed help, so they asked us. And so we developed what we call the literacy project. And so what we started was, now we hired full-time teachers who were working for us. And we hired 20 of them to come in and work for our program. And we traveled initially we were in 5 schools, and we started out, we were really focusing on training. So we start out the year by training the coaches. But after that, then we took all of the classroom teachers, and there were, at this point, probably 50 of them. We took them away on a retreat in the mountains to do a 2-day intensive training program. They were very afraid to do this. They never do anything like this. And they were like not happy that we were making them go away for a weekend and taking their weekends away to do the training. But we did it and it worked great. It was a super experience. The nice thing about being in the mountains was it's cooler. Where we work, it is very hot. It's almost never below 90, and often when I'm there, it's always over 100, maybe 105, and you're talking about in classrooms that don't have air conditioning. They don't even have fans in a lot of the classrooms. But if you are in a classroom, when I try to teach teachers and I would do seminars, and you'd be in a classroom, and there's so many fans going around and they're very noisy, it's really hard to hear anything. And so we took them up to the mountains and it was cool, and we didn't need any fans at all. And you could hear everything. It was wonderful. There was no telephone reception, so nobody could use their cell phones. And it was great. And they had a really good experience, and they have been bugging us ever since to expand it and make it longer. But it's relatively expensive to do, so we haven't done that yet. But we start them off with that training, and then what we do is our teacher, we call them literacy coaches, our coaches travel to these schools and they spend 1 day teaching the kids in that school and working with the teachers and doing a modeling of best teaching practices to use. The most common way that teachers in our schools in India teach is that they write everything on the board and the kids copy it down in their notebooks. And then they will just, they tell them, okay, here's your questions, you memorize these questions and memorize these answers, and then they test them on it. And that's pretty much it. So we were trying to change that and use a lot of different methodology in our classrooms that they don't ever see. One thing, we definitely emphasize reading, and we use phonics and teaching reading. Phonics is just being introduced into Indian classrooms now, but we started it back in 2016, and that was working. Here you can see, I didn't want to do that. The kids here are they each get these little envelopes that we cut up all these letters, and then they make words with the letters, and they learn the letters and the sounds and how to make words. This classroom teacher right here is doing you can't see them, I don't think, but they write that we put their names on a little card you can write on it and wipe it off, and they practice writing their names and just learning how to do that in English, which most of them don't know how to do. We use buddy reading system where we have kids pairing and working together with each other to help each other with their reading. We teach in teams, usually of 5 teachers, 4 literacy teachers, and 1 computer teacher. We do teach computer education. We bring laptops to all these classes, and they don't have computers in their schools. And so they learn how to use a computer, and the point of that is to give them more access to books and things. So their classrooms, if you can see, okay, this is a classroom and this is a pretty nice classroom, comparatively speaking, but once again, there are no desks, there are no books. There are no libraries in the schools, there are no libraries in the classrooms, there are no community libraries around us, and they have no books at home. We surveyed our kids, and one year we surveyed 500 of the kids, and out of those 500, one child had a book in their house, that's all. So you don't find it, there's no culture of reading. People do not read. 97% of all the books published in India are textbooks or testing preparation books. So there's not even much to read. The kids' books are almost non-existent. We started working with an Indian children's book company that's a wonderful book company called Problem Books, and they publish books at a low reading level. They're generally about 16 pages long, and they have been working with us now for almost 10 years, and they provide us with a lot of books that we take around to our classrooms and distribute to the kids, put in the classes, and use in our classrooms. And then I bring over a lot of books from the US when I come, but as you know, books are heavy and it's expensive to bring them. We emphasize reading aloud. Our teachers read aloud in every classroom. That is never done in an Indian classroom. They don't ever read aloud stories. Parents do not read aloud to their children. I know parents who have PhDs in English, and the concept of reading aloud to their kids was unheard of. And so, they started doing it after we talked to them about the importance of doing that. So we read aloud to them, but it's been very hard to get the classroom teachers to even do the same thing. We train them in how to do read alouds, but they're not comfortable doing it. So we started with that. This shows you, this is, if you've heard of a banyan tree, that's a banyan tree. And the kids are reading outside underneath the tree. We started bringing books in a rickshaw, so that's our mobile library. And we bring the books to all the kids and lay them out on their verandas, and they go around and they pick books to read, and they will read them for the library time that we're there. Unfortunately, we still don't have enough books to be able to provide them to all of our students in all of our schools and let them borrow them. We have to drive them around, use them, take them back up, take them to the next school. Because we now have, let's see, we have it in the next one. Now you're seeing by 2019, we had 23 schools, 2,200 students, 100 classroom teachers, 20 full-time literacy coaches, and our coaches travel these routes every week. So we go 677 miles to get to all these kids. We go by motorbike, we go by car, we go by rickshaw, by bus, however we can get there. And everybody doesn't go to every school, but we have our kids, our coaches divided up into these teams, and then we try to put them in different schools and keep them in the same schools so that they then develop, okay, you guys are working with these 4 schools every week. And so then they develop rapport with the students, with the teachers, and they work with them all the time. So that's basically how the program works. Then the pandemic. So you can see, let's see, there's a bag in the back, I guess. One of those bags that we have them, I brought one of these bags here for you to see. Our schools were closed for 2 years. Nothing was open. And even for us, it was very hard for us to get into the schools. We tried to come and visit. We would have to, especially at the beginning, we had to get permission. They wouldn't let us in at all because of the pandemic, and particularly before vaccines. And we would have to get permission from the police to go in, and they would come and watch what we were doing when we came in during the pandemic. But we started what we called a feed and read program. So we would travel to the schools, we'd bring them these bags, and we had, some books in them. we read aloud stories, we do a craft project, we bring snacks for them to eat. We had masks for them. I have one of our masks back there. We would check everybody's temperature. If they had a temperature, they had to go home. They weren't allowed to stay. And the other thing that we did was we did story time. So our teachers would read stories in Tamil and in English on WhatsApp, which is the most popular app in India. And we read 300 stories over the course of like 2 years. But that's it. That's all the kids had for 2 years. So basically they were just running wild in the villages for 2 years. They didn't do, anything. And our Feed and Read program, it was limited by the time we got around to all these schools, all 23 of them, and, getting permission to do it and all of that. We maybe got to every school 3-4 times, and that was it, that we got to them in 2 years. So it was bad. So we had staff. We had 20 staff who we wanted to use. We continued to pay them through the pandemic, which was pretty unusual. The only people who got paid during the pandemic in our area in India, teacher-wise, were government teachers. If you worked for the government, you still got paid. But anybody else who wasn't working in a government school got paid nothing. So, and then most of our parents are day laborers. So they're in the sugarcane fields, they're in the rice paddies, they're doing that kind of, manual labor. So we found that for our people, family incomes dropped to zero. I mean, it was bad enough before. You saw, $101 per capita, but it went to zero. So people were really hungry. And India had a very severe lockdown starting in March. On March 24th, everybody had to be locked in their houses. You were not allowed out of your house. And that lasted for 6 weeks. And it was very tough. And so what we started to do, we decided that we would try to feed people. And so our staff worked on feeding people. And we gave them enough food. We figured a family of 5 was kind of average. And so we gave a family of 5 enough food to feed them for a week. And we did for 10,000 families. That took us a couple months to distribute it all. I mean, we gave them rice, we gave them oil, we gave them some herbs, and things like onions, because they use that in all their cooking. So people would come. We had these social distancing circles that they would put on the ground, and everybody had to stand on those and get in line. And remember, this was all very early on. People were very afraid, and so, but they were hungry. So they came and they would get their food. This was at one of our schoolyards. And we went to every single village where we worked. We went to different gypsy, we work with the gypsies a lot. And so there's a number of gypsy communities in our area. We went to the gypsy camps. There's a big transgender community in our area. We went to the transgender village. We went to schools for the disabled. Any place where people were having problems, we distributed food. So that worked out really well, and that's what our staff was doing. Instead of teaching, they became social workers. We also started a street feeding program. The town of Villapuram, we're in the Villapuram district. The town of Villapuram is a small little town of about 1 million people. And there's no soup kitchens there. There's no, food pantries, no place where you can go pick stuff up. And so we decided that we were going to start a street feeding program. And we would cook meals usually we try to do 100 hot meals a day. And we drive around on motorcycles and on this rickshaw that became, you saw it with our books. We use it to feed people. We use it for everything. And we took the food around to all these different, people laying in the streets and have given them food. So we distributed 25,000 meals since the pandemic started, and we're still continuing the program now because there really isn't anything for these people. Sometimes the temples The Hindu temples will distribute food, but you have to go to the temple to get it. And so for a lot of these people, they can't go there, and they don't know where to go or anything. So we drive around and we hand out the food. And so I have some staff who continue to do this. He's one of, sorry, this gentleman here is one of our teachers, but he works in this street feeding program a lot. And so they all help out with that. That's been a really great program. And then we decided that we would do vaccinations. We partnered with the government to do vaccinations. They were having, people in India were terrified that they were going to die if they got vaccinated. I mean, that was a huge issue. And I fought with my own staff for a month, at least, to get them vaccinated because they were afraid they didn't want to get vaccinated. And finally, I made it mandatory that they had to get vaccinated if they wanted to work with us. They did. They were very afraid, but they did it. And then, you know, they came around and they started setting an example for everybody else because then they could see that they didn't die. There was no, it was completely different than here. It's not that, you know, people felt like, well, I have the right to decide whether or not to get vaccinated. That wasn't it. They were afraid. And so our whole effort was, okay, how can we make them feel more comfortable doing this? And so we developed a whole program to be able to do it. We would go into the villages, we would go door to door, we would meet with village groups. This group down here, you can see, these guys are day workers. They were working in, I don't know what they were doing. But there's a government program called the 100-Day Work Program, and they get paid for working 100 days out of the year. And so it's very poor people who have no work. So we would work with their employers, get them to bring the people together, and they wanted them to get vaccinated because they wanted them to keep working. So we would talk to them, and then we got the employers to let them have the afternoon off to go get their vaccinations and then go home. So we worked with them. We developed all kinds of materials. This was, you can see a partial poster that we would put up, and it was be in English and Tamil about getting vaccinated. We developed a checklist for the doctors to use at the centers when they were vaccinating people. They had a lot of, the health department had a lot of trouble persuading people to get vaccinated, and they were getting pushed to get people vaccinated, but they could not persuade the people in the villages, like the villages we worked in, where the poorest people live, to get vaccinated. And the only way that they were able to get them out was because we helped them. And the people there trusted us already. We taught their kids, we already gave them food earlier on, and now they were coming to get vaccinated. And this was almost a year later after the pandemic started. This didn't happen right away. But we vaccinated 35,000 in regular camps, and then we also worked with disabled people. We would either go to their houses or we would bring them to the camp, whatever they wanted. Sometimes they had special setups for them. A lot of blind would get vaccinated with us. So anyway, it was a huge program, and it's what our teachers did for the second year of the pandemic. You can see that we did a lot of unusual things. When the government would run a vaccination camp, basically what they did was they set up the camp and people came and got vaccinated, and that was it. There was nothing else. They didn't do anything at the camps. They didn't check people. They just vaccinated and sent them home. We did a completely different routine. Besides the education, we would bring them into the camp and we would give them a mini checkup. Most of the people in the villages where we live don't go to the doctor unless it's an emergency or unless they're just sick. There's no preemptive medication, visits. They're not doing preventative health. And so we would give them a checkup. We check their blood pressure. We check their temperature. We'd ask them about allergies to try and check for allergic reactions to the vaccines, and do all of those things when people came in. we got them vaccinated, then we would have them sit down in a group in a separate area, and we would give them a snack before they left, and we talked about potential side effects, because they were afraid, they thought they were gonna die. We wanted to warn them, all right, it's very likely that you're gonna feel body pain, that you might get a fever. And so we talked to them about all that. We distributed paracetamol, which is the same medicine as Tylenol. We gave them each 4 tablets so they could take that home, and we advised them to take it at night, okay? They usually weren't getting those symptoms, just like if any of you had symptoms after your vaccinations. You didn't usually get them right away. You got them that night. And so we were talking to them about that. They don't have, a bottle of Tylenol in their houses. No, they don't have that. So we gave them that. If they needed a mask, we gave them a mask. Everybody got one of these little stickers about getting their shot, which they liked. And we also had a photo board which they could get their picture taken in, showing that they got vaccinated. Everybody got a 5-kilogram bag of rice who got vaccinated. That was a huge draw. And that evening, our staff called every single person to check and see how they were. Anybody who had any questions was given the telephone of a nurse. We had an RN that we paid to be on call all night long to answer questions. So people would actually call. They would get like 50 calls a night from people. At a typical vaccination camp, sometimes we only vaccinated 25 people, but sometimes we vaccinated more than 1,000 people in a camp. So they would call the nurse, she would talk to them. On a few occasions, I think there were about 10 or 12 instances where people had some kind of reaction. They were vomiting, they had a really high fever or whatever. So most of these people, they're all in these little villages, they don't have cars. And so we hired an ambulance to then take them to a hospital where we had already set up arrangements with a doctor to check them. And they did that, and we didn't have anybody who was hospitalized. But it made them feel better, and so we did it, and that's what happened. And then after the first round of vaccines, then we went back and tried to get them for the second round. That was harder. They weren't nearly as interested in getting a second shot as they were in the first shot, but we worked on that. So our staff did a great job, and they worked on that for the whole year. We helped the medical staff, like they would ask us for things. Every time we had one of these camps, there might be like 15 doctors and nurses who would come to the camps that we were working with, plus our employees. We fed everybody lunch that day. Everybody got fed who was working, the doctors, everybody. They would ask for better blood pressure cuffs, we got them those. Whatever we could get them to help them, we did. Everybody got a mask if they needed it. And so it was just a huge effort. We even would we would help pay for coffins for people who died. Nobody wanted to. It was very easy in India. You could not trust the statistics that you were getting out of India as to how many people had disease, because people didn't want to say that they died of COVID. It impacted burials, it impacted all kinds of stuff, and so it was very easy to get the doctors to write a death certificate for a heart attack. We were getting like lots and lots of people who had heart attacks all of a sudden, many more than usual. But we knew they died of COVID, and so they didn't have money for caskets. We were buying those. Anything we could do to help out, we did for those 2 years. One of the things we did at the end was we tried to get the youth to come out, because like everywhere, we found the youth was not coming out to get shots. So we made a music video. This guy is Vijay Vijay. He's a pop singer in Chennai, and he's pretty much of a star. And some of the people, he works with Vijay, he works with Vijay. The rest of these people are my staff. And so we put together this music video, we wrote the lyrics, the music, and produced this video. So I'm going to show you that now. Let's see.
this earlier today and it's working.
It's not. I can't get it to come up.
Betsy, there's a left button there.
Yeah, that just goes back there. I had there was a button that came off the bottom of this that let me play the video, but it's not. So you'll have to believe me that we made this music video that was really good. But I can't show it to you. So we'll just keep moving. After the pandemic was over, we went and assessed our kids again. And so you can see that basically everything that we had taught them for the past 4 years was gone. And so we had 83% of our kids, as far as English, only knew their letters or nothing, okay? And the same pretty much for math. Even though we weren't teaching math at the time, we used problems in math because we knew it was going to be a problem also, just as it's been in the US and every place else, except worse. So we took a look at this and decided, all right, we're going to have to do something else. And so now what we've done is we've changed from, we used to be the literacy project, and now we're the accelerated learning program, and we added math to our curriculum. We're up to 3,000 students. We are still focusing on social and emotional learning. You can see our kids doing a laying down exercise where they actually go out and get a stone and put it on their stomachs and then breathe with that. We've had some of our kids fall asleep doing this. So we've put math in. You can see in this slide, kids are playing Math 24. Do you play that in your school? Yeah, well, our kids love Math 24. And so that's just a game that we use in our program. Our coaches, we've been really trying to push them, focusing on more training. Now remember, my coaches have not been teaching for 2 years. So now, and I was not allowed in India for 2 years. It was closed to foreigners coming in, so I couldn't get in. Normally, I had been going to India for 6 months out of the year. I'd go like 2 months at a time, 3 times a year, and now for 2 years I wasn't there at all. My staff in India is all Indian. I'm the only American the only Westerner who goes. But I am responsible for training my staff and training the teachers. And so they didn't have any of that for 2 years. So we've been really focusing, I've been doing a lot of Zoom calls with them. And when I've been back in India now, this past year, I was there in January and again in May and June. And we worked on training our staff a lot. And every Friday afternoon, they teach 4.5 days a week. And Friday afternoons, they come to our offices and they get more training on that Friday afternoon. So every Friday afternoon, they're there training. These are some of the classroom teachers. Session with them when I was there in January, and again in May. And so I haven't been able to take them up into the mountains like I used to, but we've been doing just day sessions. And so maybe, hopefully next year, we'll get up into the mountains with them. But we've been really, really pushing and focusing. This is one of my teachers, this is Daisy. She was doing a book talk. I have my teachers reading and doing book talks with each other because, like everybody else in this part of India, my teachers don't read books either. So I have to get them reading books. When I talk to, most high school students in our area will never have read a book by the time they graduate high school. They will not have read a single book. My teachers who are graduates of college and have teaching degrees, most of them have never read a book until they came to me. And so now I'm like, we read books, I buy mainly middle school books. that we read so that they can get more used to reading every day. So we've started back to school now, and we're working on it. I'm hoping that this is gonna work. This video is a little different than the last one. We have a Lego robotics program that's been going on now for, I think, 10 years. We do an after-school program. We go into the classrooms and teach. We are the only robotics center in the Villaporm district, and most of our kids have never seen a Lego. All of them, nobody had ever seen a Lego before they get into this program because they don't have Legos and they don't have toys. And so this is my my coach. This is Siva. Siva's been working with me since I first got to India, and he does a great job. And I brought up this WeDo kit, this Lego robotics kit when I got there to say, okay, Siva, you're going to teach robotics. And he looked at it and he comes to me like a day later and says, I can't do this. This is too hard. I don't know anything about this. And now he's a fabulous teacher. And we compete. We were the South Indian regional champions, and we win a lot of prizes for robotics now. And so it's a great program for us. And I'm hoping that this is gonna work. Yes. This is our robotics center in Villaporm. It's very little, but it does a great job. We have little kids who come in and older kids. This is our robotics team, just some pictures. That was the national champion, or they were the South Indian champions, and that was one of our project teams. We also have a college program. We have 8 kids in college right now studying these different subjects, everything from nursing and prosthetics to political science and Tamil. We help them in varying degrees. But they have to report back to us all the time. We check in with them every week to see how they're doing, and we have meetings, probably every time there's a big vacation, these kids get together, and I meet with them whenever I go. So that's been a great program. We have a super summer camp that's a residential 1-week camp that our kids have been participating in since 2015. We do a lot of great stuff. Swimming is the definite highlight. There's a pool that another NGO owns that they don't use at all, and we have to completely clean and fill it and fix it before we can use it every year because they don't even have water in it. But the camp is really popular with all of our kids. This is a map of all the things we do. And you can see Lego, after school, literacy project, all these computer education, all that stuff, which sort of takes you around. And we are the change, which is a take on Gandhi's saying, be the change you want to see in the world. And that's it. So thank you very much. Hope you learned something about what we do and about education in India. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, does anybody have questions about all this? I went through a lot of stuff pretty fast.
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Are you primarily still dealing with the lower caste?
Yes.
Okay, the lower caste were street cleaners, etc.
Mhm.
They're prohibited by culture to move up.
Well,
Why would they get an advanced degree?
Well, they
I'm
can't.
just curious.
They can't move up in caste.
Right.
Okay, they can't move in their caste, but they can move up in life. It is possible through education to do better.
Right.
To get a good job. So there are Dalits now. Dalits before were never allowed to be teachers. Dalits are teachers now. Dalits are engineers. Dalits are prosthetists that we have. They can do all these things, but they need help with, they need to get the education to do it. But they can move up. It's possible. It's just not possible to change your caste.
I have to admit, caste system is just, I'm not familiar with it. I'm
Sure.
totally alien, and I'm
Well,
just,
we don't have that here, but,
Well, yeah.
sure, it's a critical part of life in India. My biggest, I guess, one of the biggest things that I've witnessed is the problems with intercaste marriage. It's very difficult to marry between castes.
1 minute.
And I protected a young woman who was marrying a Dalit, and she was not a Dalit, and she lived with me for a week before she got married so that she would be safe and nobody would find her, to be able to stop that marriage before it took place. But it causes a lot of problems.
we've had that problem in this country, depending where you are, in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Races just didn't match. Race that was not caste.
Sure,
race
it's comparable.
Right.
Right, yeah.
and religion, depending
Yes.
where you were.
And